What's up, guys? This is Kephas.
Hey look, it's me standing at the steps of Dornagal again. You know what this means? We're going to be doing another mod video, and we sure are. This time, we are going to be talking about Consoleport and one of the biggest challenges that many players seem to be facing when using Consoleport, and it basically all involves targeting. I would say that the biggest struggle that playing with the controller brings to the table, people that do play with the controller will often experience this, is trying to target things. And I can certainly agree that this is one of the more challenging aspects. Whether it's targeting enemies or targeting allies, it can get very difficult or cumbersome or imprecise. And so what I'm going to try to do today is I'm going to try and show some methods that you can use to hopefully help make things easier, or more so just the various methods that you have for targeting. Okay, and so that's what we're going to try and do today. But do know that yes, the targeting is definitely going to be the more challenging obstacle to get around, and that's because of a couple of things. Number one, controller support is enabled for World of Warcraft, but it's not necessarily natively supported. It is to a certain extent. Like, there are hotkeys built in, you can adjust them even without Consoleport. Consoleport just kind of takes it to the next level, and so you can use that. I've done several videos on Consoleport, done different guides, but overall you're going to come into some aspects of the game that are going to be harder to deal with, just because the game has very limited official controller support, and UI navigation, particularly targeting enemies and allies, is going to be the biggest problem that you're going to have to face. So I've especially heard this from people that maybe play the game at a higher level. You have to keep in mind that, like, I play the game casually. I'm not out there running mythic plus high mythic raids and dungeons and doing all that kind of stuff. I kind of play the game casually, so that's not stuff that I ever really have to worry about. But even at a lower level, I can definitely see where that could definitely become a problem when you're trying to be precise, and maybe you don't have an option with controller that is going to be nearly as precise. I mean, obviously, like, if I use a mouse, I can be very precise on what I'm targeting. I can target anybody with a click. Certainly if you use an @cursor macro, you can just @cursor, hit the button, and it'll put the effect on the ground right at your cursor, heal the ally, whatever it is that you're doing. You're not going to have that with a controller, and that's going to be a big problem, especially if you're like a healer that uses that, or you have interrupts, different things like that. That's definitely something that you're not going to have with the controller, because when you're using a controller, it's more like an action game. You're looking around with the right joystick. You can access the mouse for sure, but obviously trying to do that with a joystick, not saying you couldn't do it, but it would take a lot of practice, and it's just very cumbersome. So that's not something that is entirely feasible for everybody, and so that's kind of why you have that challenge. So you have to look for other methods to manage your targeting, and so there's a couple of things. And it depends on the level of play that you're trying to get here, but one of the first things I'd like to talk about is if you go into options here and you go to combat, and if you scroll down, there's one big one that can be very helpful, and you'll have to forgive me as I try to find it. Here it is. It's this one down here called action targeting, and this is available for all versions of the game. Everything I'm talking about pretty much is going to work for all versions of the game. And so if you enable this, then what happens is when you look at an enemy, it does this like soft targeting thing, and as I move around, it'll switch between whichever enemy that I'm looking at. Now if I do like a tab targeting thing, well, now it's hard locked onto that one target, so it'll stop doing that. But for just running around, especially as a melee, if I'm out in the world and I'm just fighting some enemies, this can get very helpful. Like, it can be very helpful to just kind of look around, or just hit this guy, just start fighting, kill that one, then switch over to this one. So that can be very useful, especially when you're fighting like one or two enemies. If you're starting to fight like a bunch of enemies, then you can often find yourself like bouncing back and forth between the two. So sometimes you might find yourself in a situation where you want to hard lock one, and there I just hit my tab targeting button and it just kind of hard locked onto the one that I'm looking at. So, but yeah, that's definitely going to be very helpful and make the game feel a little bit more action based when you don't necessarily need to be as precise. So that's one thing that you can do that can be very helpful for targeting enemies. But then there are a couple of other things that we can look at as well. Okay, so if we go into Consoleport, as soon as I'm no longer in combat, there we go. If we go into Consoleport, you'll see here that I have a couple of different targeting options set up on my controller. So the first one is with my left joystick here, and it says target scan enemy hold. That's one. The other one is target nearest enemy. This is also known as tab targeting, and that one is tied to B. That's the one that I use most often, but you have to remember that I'm mostly in situations where I don't necessarily need to be as precise. So you have to remember that you can keybind anything that is default key bindable in the game, but then Consoleport also has some of its own special keybinds as well. So target nearest enemy, this is just going to be your standard tab targeting. It'll cycle through what's in front of you, and then it'll do a cone around you left or right, and that's how that's going to work. And then of course you have target scan enemy, and so what this one does is it will hard target whatever you're looking at directly in front of you, and I think it might go what's nearest. So like this one kind of is a little bit confusing, but basically is if I'm looking at this here and I hit this, well, now it's locked onto that one. So I just hit the target scan enemy. If I look over at this one and hit it, now it's going to lock onto that one and it's going to stay that way. So that's kind of how it works. As you can see, it will cycle between them if I'm here and I'm hitting it. So that kind of works like that. But where tab targeting, I can just look ahead and it'll do this. It'll kind of go back and forth. Now this is fine when it's just a couple, but when you have several enemies and they're kind of spread out, some in front of you, some behind you, it can get very random and very imprecise. So this target, see, like there you saw, look, now we're kind of doing, see, it'll do something like this, and it can get kind of, especially as you move around and they move around, it can be very difficult. So the target scan enemy one can be a little bit more precise because it will target whatever you're looking at, but it's still, obviously it's not perfect for every situation. Also, if you hold it down, then you can do this where it'll kind of, do that, and then when you let go, it'll lock on to whichever one you have selected. So those are two really useful methods for targeting that can kind of help. I like to use both of them, but I do mostly just use tab targeting. But again, I don't really always need to be that precise. Honestly, most of the time I just use the action targeting, especially as a melee character. It does fine, for what I'm doing, so that's fine. But that's so there's kind of three different ways that you can target enemies. But here's the challenge, and this is what a lot of people run into. Let's say you're fighting this guy here. Okay, you're fighting this guy here, but then this guy, you need to interrupt him, right? You don't want to look off this guy, but then you got this guy over here that needs to be interrupted. Okay, let's say you have like 5 guys here, and one of them you're going to need to interrupt. This is the problem that a lot of people find themselves in, where I can't mouse over, I can't use my mouse, I can't click off and do it like that. That's not going to be very good. And then tab targeting, if there's a bunch of enemies, I'm trying to get to the right one, see, like I need to get this guy, oh no, it's not sticking to the one I need, that kind of thing. And then he casts a spell. This is a big problem. This is a problem that a lot of people with controller players will face when they're in a situation like that, and that is a problem. Sadly, there's not really going to be an easy way to fix that for every situation, and that's the truth of the matter. There's not a great way to be precise without your mouse that I know of, and so you kind of have to just try to do your best, and certainly if you play at a higher level, that may be where it may be better to play with a keyboard and mouse until there's more support added. I have to applaud the Consoleport mod author for doing their very best, because a lot of this stuff that they've done is pretty amazing in what you can do, but certainly when you're playing at a higher level, there are some challenges that you might find yourself coming into. Okay, there are a couple of other things that you can do though. Okay, and so one of those would be like, let's say you're going into the fight and there's a specific enemy that you need to you need to interrupt. Okay, so you could coordinate with your group, and if it's a boss fight, and what you could do is you could do focus targeting. Okay, so let's say I need to interrupt this guy here. So I'm going to target him, and then I'm going to click on this. I'm going to open up my find it here. My is it this one? Yes. So there, I can do this, and now I've got this menu, and I can set this to my focus. Okay. And so what that's going to do is, and there you go. Now it's working. Now and you can also set a hotkey for this specifically with your controller or whatever. So now he's my focus target. Okay. And what I can do is I can create a focus macro with that guy's name. So I do a focus macro at focus. It doesn't have to be that guy's name. It's just be at focus and my interrupt. And so now if I do that, I have this guy focused. He's the guy I'm going to have to interrupt. I can fight him. And then when I use my interrupt, it would do it on my focus target. Okay. And so that's something else that you could do to kind of help with targeting. That may not be ideal in every situation, but it is an option that you can try. So focus targeting can be very helpful for interrupts if it's a situation where you know the name of the guy, and you're like, if it's like going to be that, you know, this is the target that we want you to interrupt. Coordinate that with your team, and you can do it that way. If it has to be something on the fly, or you have to interrupt multiple people, that can certainly become a little bit more challenging. But in certain situations, just doing a focus targeting macro will help. And look, you can look up how to make any kind of macro that I'm going to talk about. You can look them up very easily. Just Google it. You'll find everything you need to know. So that's something that you can do that can help out as well. Okay. And so that's really, like, in terms of targeting enemies, that's all I know. I've tried to cover some different ones. Now we need to come in and talk about something that's a little bit harder, and that is targeting allies. And so in order to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to go into a follower dungeon, and I will see you guys over there. All right, so now we have a party, and we're going to look at different ways that you can use to target party members. This can be very challenging. I've actually done a video where I've played as a healer playing with a controller, and it's very difficult, because you don't have the easiest methods for targeting your party members. You don't have something like Final Fantasy 14 where you can D-pad up and down very quickly to get to your different party members. There's no party cycling hotkey as far as I know that's available. So and there's no easy way to do it that's very intuitive and snappy. So that's kind of a problem when you're in a fast-paced, high-stakes environment. It's not always going to be ideal. And there are also different things. Like I said, we don't have the access to at cursor macros. We can't do things casting on our cursor or anything like that. So that's going to definitely be a problem, and it can certainly feel very cumbersome in certain situations when you're trying to quickly target a party member. Even if you're playing a rep paladin like me and you want to use Hand of Sacrifice, it can get a little tricky. So yeah, that's definitely something to think about for sure. But I am going to show you some different things that you can do to target party members. Now, the way I'm doing it, you can look here. We'll go back over to my hotkeys. If you look over on the left side and you look at my D-pad hotkeys, you can see that I have target party members 1 through 4 set to my D-pad. And so if you look, what that means is if I hit D-pad up, down, left, or right, I'm targeting my 4 party members. This is great for 5-man content, and it's the way I found for me that works really well. Once you memorize who's where and which D-pad button selects which target, then you can very quickly target somebody, hit D-pad up, then I can cast heal, and bam, see there, I healed them. So quickly you can do that, and that kind of works for a lot of situations. It's great for when you're in a 5-man, and this is the way that I choose to heal, and it's also the way I just use it in general for smaller group content. Okay, so that's one way that you can do it. All right, another thing that you can do again is you can focus target. So focus targeting can be very useful with the controller or in general. So let's say I want to, let's target my tank here. It's a great example. So I've got my tank targeted. Let's say that I want to use misdirection as a hunter and I want to cast it on my tank, right? Well, what I would do is I would make a macro. I'd say focus, misdirection. again, look up how to make a focus macro. You can do that, and then if I'll go into the dungeon or whatever, target my tank, set up focus them, and then whenever I use misdirection, it'll always cast on them, and that's how I can do certain things like that. So things like that, tricks of the trade, misdirection, whatever it is. If you have something that you want to put on your healer, or whatever, then that's an easy way to do it throughout the dungeon group. And so that's one thing that you can do that will also be very helpful. Okay, now aside from that, though, let's say you're in a larger group, right? You got more than 5 people. First off, if you want to cast on yourself, then like I have auto self cast. So when I don't have any party members selected and I heal, I will automatically heal myself. So I don't need a hotkey for myself. But if we are in a group where there's more than 4 people or whatever, there are a couple of options. So the first one is we'll go back to my hotkeys here. Okay, and so I have a couple of them set up here. And so if I hit one of my options, then the first one is target raid cursor. Okay, and you can see that on B. Now target raid cursor. Okay, here we go. So toggle raid cursor, that's it. So this is what toggle raid cursor will do. If I hit it, it'll bring up a raid cursor that'll allow me to cycle through my party members. Okay, and so here, let's go ahead and activate that now. So I hit that, and then bam, there it is. You can see here that now I can use it to cycle between all of my party members, and this can be very useful depending on how your UI is set up, especially to use this. And then what will happen is this kind of works as almost like a cursor in itself, and so I can do it this way. This is a little bit closer to how Final Fantasy does it, but as you can see here, I can do this, cycle around, and then bam, I'm cycling through and healing people. This will also move left to right. So if I have my layout is like a box with multiple rows, then I can move left to right, up and down. So you can kind of do that, and that can work once you get the hang of it. That can also work as well. But then there's the other one, which you can do, which I actually don't have hotkeyed right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and hotkey this really fast. And this is target unit frames hold. Okay. And so what this is going to do is when I hold down this hotkey, you can see now that there are buttons over your unit frames, your party members. And so if I hit B and let go of the hotkey, then now I've targeted my ally, right? So there you go. If I do it again and hit A and do it, that's gonna heal that person. Yeah, as you can see, if I do double tap, as it says, double A, then I can target myself if I want to. So yeah, this is another thing that you can do. You can get used to this, and you can quickly heal your allies or whatever you're doing. So there you have a few methods for somewhat a good, again, I applaud the mod author, because these are really good options to try depending on how comfortable you are with them. It's not the most it's not always the most intuitive, depending on how your UI is set up, depending on how many party members you have or what situation that you're in. It's certainly not as quick as doing it with a mouse in terms of just cursoring over allies or whatever. But with time and with practice, I think that you could, at a certain point, get to a pretty decent, there are some people that are just amazing. I mean, there was a guy that beat Elden Ring who was I believe a quadriplegic. Okay, so if that guy can beat Elden Ring, then you can heal and WoW with a controller, right? So it can be done. Okay, and there are different options that you can try out, but it's certainly not going to always be as easy or as intuitive as it could be. And so hopefully in time, Blizzard will implement their, more controller support, natively supported. Maybe they'll even implement Consoleport into the game. I think it would be great because I think there's a lot of room for improvement here, but I think a lot of that would just kind of fall on having more support with the controller and enabling more possibilities with UI and unit frame navigation, targeting, different things like that. So there are things that can be done to improve it for sure, but you do have options. And so I hope that this video kind of explored some of those options. These are the ones that I know of. Like I said, you can get pretty creative with certain macros. There are also help harm macros that you can try out. Of course, focus is going to really be helpful as well. So try some of those out. Let me know if you have a method that I didn't talk about in the comments below, and let me know, of course, if this helped you out. I really do hope that it did. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for taking an interest in my videos. I'm glad that my controller videos are helpful for people and that people find them useful and are interesting. So again, thank you guys so much, and I will see you guys on the next one.
Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, let me know by clicking that like button. and feel free to share it with your friends so they can enjoy it as well. And if you'd like to see more videos, you can subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to be notified as soon as new videos are posted. You can also follow me on Facebook, and if you'd like, you can support my work on Patreon. Links to all that stuff can be found in the description below. This is Kephas. Until next time.